Disclaimer thing.
I,
I would do that.
we need,
What I'm saying right now. So you can just say it now.
and
It's right there underneath Scott. So it's at 0 right now because
Oh.
just started. Yes, that's it.
so it'll just populate right there.
And we'll, so 5, 12,
Well.
and then you're gonna get your questions here. Anyway,
And I may need help with that.
they're just gonna pop up in that little chat.
I may still need help with that.
Okay.
Morning.
Good morning.
How are you doing, Scott?
I'm just fine.
Good to see you. Good to see you. So we've got a few minutes. It's about 6 minutes till where I'm at. We've got some folks joining in right now, it looks like. So welcome everybody that's joining in. We are going to wait until 10 o'clock. It's our start time. We've got some folks coming in. We went ahead and started a couple of minutes early, and we're getting all set up and ready to go. And I'm just visiting with my guest here a little bit. So just hang tight and enjoy the conversation or the screen while we wait till 10 o'clock. So what's new in your world, Scott?
Well, it's almost time for school to start. And I like that time of year best of all because there's no little kids running around out in the street when I'm trying to take pictures of houses. There's nothing worse than doing an acreage job where the comps are spread out 5 miles apart and you get to the comp that you need and there's 20 kids in the yard running through the sprinkler, right?
Right.
So then what do you do?
You know, and sometimes they set the little pool up out front or something, or
Right.
their play area is in the front yard, and then they say, "Hey, why is this creepy guy pulling up
Right.
to take a picture
This
of
guy's
the house?"
he's driving by my house 5 times in the last hour.
Right. Yeah, that's what I do. I typically will drive around the neighborhood in hopes, you'll go in and get an ice cream or something, and then
Right.
they don't. And then you'll drive around again, or you'll turn around and drive back the other way, and now you don't look suspicious at all, do you?
I remember years ago, I was in a neighborhood out in the suburbs where it was the first day of school, and all the kids were lined up at the bus stop with their backpacks, and the moms looked kind of nervous. And then I went in the house and measured and came out 45 minutes later. The bus was long gone, and the moms were still there, and they looked like the most relieved, happy people I'd seen for a long time.
Right. Or, I've had clients over the years call and say, Brian, do you do drive-bys? And I say, sure. And I resisted those for years. We as appraisers we as human beings tend to resist change. And so I didn't do them for years. I'm the touchy-feely kind of guy. I like to be in the house. I like to see it and smell it and walk through it and know before I put my opinion of value on something. But I finally got over it. Larry Disney, our former executive director in Kentucky, kind of shook me and said, Brian, you can do those. So I will do drive-bys now, and folks will call and say, well, what is your rate for a drive-by? And I said, well, it just all depends on how fast I drive by the property, I suppose.
I kind of figured out that it costs $1 a mile to drive the car. If you pay yourself $25 an hour and have an old car.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out a way, as these Google cars come more available, that maybe we could just, is it 100% necessary in all instances for the appraiser to drive by and take that picture? I mean, could we send somebody else to do that, or could we just send a Google car to drive by and take the picture for us?
I've got a big client that does just that. They have realtors look at the house. They do a drive-by. They do a little report in the neighborhood. And then the appraiser just takes those photos and that data, and they find their best comps. And the scope is limited,
Sure.
But they're portfolio loans a lot of times, or they're wondering what to do next if the loan's under distress of some sort. So to me, I'd rather get out and drive around, but sometimes when it's cold and snowy, I'd rather sit at my desk and make my $60 an hour doing it that way.
Right. Well, that's again something that we as appraisers, human beings, resist change. And Ben or Sam, I need you to stop in and see me for a second. I have one quick question for you. But we've got to look. I'm going to have a guest coming up, Scott, in a future webinar where we're going to talk about desktop appraisals.
Right.
And I think that's what you're talking about, where someone else actually goes and visits the property or does the observation. I just wrote a course called the Appraisal Inspection. You call it observation, look around, fly by, fly over, whatever you want to do. But listen, we've got to embrace change. Change is coming, whether we like it or not. I always tell folks, look in the mirror if you think things don't change. And I think that's one thing we're going to kind of touch on today is maybe a new idea or new concept of doing things. But I'm glad you mentioned that because, we're going to be having a guest in the upcoming months talking about desktop appraisals and the good, the bad, the ugly. Is there a resistance? Heck yeah, there's a resistance. But is it something that appraisers should think about? And my prediction is we're going to see that snowball, and we're going to see more and more clients want that type of service. And we need to keep an open mind. Give something a fair shake. If you try something, it's kind of like what your mom used to say, just try your vegetables. You may like them. And that's what I'm going to encourage our viewers to do today when we get into this.
Okay. Well, I've been doing desktops for 4 years, and sometimes it's my biggest check every month is from that company. So I'm thankful for it.
If it's in number, because that makes more than 100.
Well, I thought there were more than 100. Has been.
Right, so I'm saying it's not a percentage. That all those together make more than 100.
Okay.
That's probably the number of people.
Oh, I got you.
Yeah.
And we don't know the total number. I think he said 160 or something. Okay. Just trying to get some stats here real quick before we jump on. So we've got more and more viewers coming on. We've got about a minute until we start. And I want to thank you for coming back on, Scott. We had, for all those that are already on, we had Scott a couple of months ago talking about depreciated cost, and we're having him back on today. So thanks for coming here. Scott, I'm going to go ahead and give you an opportunity during this less than 60 seconds to say hello, and go ahead and give your contact information. If somebody has questions after the event, or if they want to reach out to you, how do they get in touch with you?
Well, my email is SCULLEN, the number 2, at Comcast.net. Also, I've got a website, SolomonAppraisal.com. There's a contact page there where it goes to a different email address, pretty much centered around the software business. But my normal email is scullen2 at Comcast.net. Great.
Well, we're going to go ahead and get started. And before we officially get started, I just want to make a quick disclosure that the views expressed by our guest are not necessarily the views and opinions of Appraiser eLearning or Brian Reynolds. So we'll knock that out of the way real quick. We are here to provide information and just kind of think outside the box, if you will. So we're excited to be here. I'd like to welcome all our viewers. It's the official start time. So welcome. My name is Brian Reynolds, and you're watching the Appraisal Report coming to you from Appraiser eLearning. We'd like to welcome all our viewers. We have more and more bopping in every second, but we're going to go ahead and get started. Scott, I know you just did it, but we've actually started now. So if you don't mind, go ahead and tell everybody who you are and why you and I got together today.
Well, I'm a real estate appraiser up in Eagan, Minnesota. I do residential. I've been doing it for close to 20 years now. And about 3-4 years ago, when maybe it's 5-6 years ago, but we were all of a sudden being told to support our adjustments. And I tried to make regression work. I couldn't figure it out. I hired a grad student from the University of Minnesota who's a statistics major. He told me that the sample was flawed. Then about, 6 months or a year went by, and a friend of mine asked me about it. Just in general, he's a database guy. He just had recently retired from the state of Minnesota, computer expert. And I told him, here's my problem. I tried this sample with this guy from the U, and he said it was flawed. Can you make sense out of this? And And I gave him a sample of post-war, like 1950s Ramblers from a huge suburb in south of Minneapolis, just, like, I don't know, 500 houses. And he could not make sense out of, with his analytical ability, what is the GLA worth? What is the garage worth? What's the bathroom worth? And his conclusion was that the sample is flawed. There's too many variables for the amount of properties in the sample. And as we talked about it, he wanted to use a benchmark rather than the data itself of the sales. So we started talking about using cost as a benchmark. And it was kind of interesting. I had heard about depreciated cost, but John, without even knowing what an appraisal was, pretty much just had a sense that was a good direction to try. So we, one thing led to another, and we got it going about 2 years ago, and now we're selling it to people or renting it to people on a subscription basis, and it's growing well. It's doing well. I use it all the time, and I can't believe I didn't have this 10 years ago. So it's kind of fun.
Right. So what we're talking about is a recognized technique, and let me just share with the viewers some results from a little survey we did. Scott, we sent a question out, and the question that we ask appraisers around the country is, how do you support your adjustments? And we gave them some options. We gave them paired sales, regression analysis, depreciated cost, group sales, and market survey. And it's amazing that we had about 40%, just over 40% answer paired sales. So imagine that. We did have some folks speak of regression. And guys, these are all recognized techniques. And before we actually kind of hone in on what Scott has to offer and tell us today, I want to just say that all of these are recognized techniques. And if you hit a wall in one area, maybe you investigate another wall. Like I've been telling folks about regression all along, is before you decide, oh, I hate it, I don't like it, at least give it a try. Tim Anderson, Dr. Samuel Henderson offer courses on that. I believe David Braun has some software available. Josh Weilat has some software available. And it's like I say when we talk about something new, try it. Give it a fair shake. I ask appraisers, how many of you have tried using a tablet out in the field, Scott? And most still resist that.
Yeah, I'm one of them.
and well, I'm going to work on you next. Well, but it's like, we don't type our reports via a typewriter. We could. It just doesn't make sense. We don't use the old Polaroid cameras anymore. It just doesn't make sense. So, maybe we'll have another segment on being digital or doing an iPad or technology out in the field. It is a tool readily available for you, and we tend to resist it. And what I was going to say is, even when I have appraisers say, oh, no, I tried that, I hated it. And I said, okay, you tried the tablet out in the field. Oh, yeah, I tried it. I said, okay, well, how long did you try that for? Oh, a week. So you didn't really try it, right? So investigate these various techniques, if you will. I want to remind folks that a recognized technique is depreciated cost. If you subtract value from cost, you get depreciation. But if you take cost minus depreciation, you get value. So before we get in the topic of virtual sales, tell me about the depreciated cost, because you're using that already.
Right. Well, appraisers, ever since I've been hanging around appraisers, they'll always say that cost does not equal value. And right. But there's something that took me a long time to figure out, is that cost minus depreciation is the value, pretty right. much like what you just said. The trick is knowing what the amount of depreciation is. So using depreciated cost, I think the trick is to use the cost approach to extract the depreciation from the market, and then go from there. Now that you know what the depreciation is, let's say that the cost approach shows the depreciation is 20%. Well, what that's saying is that the market is paying 80% of the cost of the building. So when you say that house sold for $250,000, you could also say that house sold for land 50, depreciated costs 200, and that 200 is 80% of a bigger number, whatever that other number was. I can't do the math in my head, but let's say it was $300,000 or something. So there's a lot of ways to talk about what a house sold for, and I prefer to think of it in terms of they bought it for land plus the depreciated cost of the improvements.
Right. Yeah. Textbook definition is that depreciation is the result of cost minus value. So, so you're onto something there. Let's get to the subject matter, the topic of today. We've got several users in now, and I'd like to remind all the viewers watching, if you have a question, you can type that in. We'll ask Scott of that question. We will try to answer as many questions as possible during the course of this broadcast. And if we don't get all of the questions answered during the live broadcast, I will share those with Scott after the broadcast, and they ask that he reach out to you directly with an answer to any questions you may have. So with that being said, with the viewers knowing they can chime in and ask questions at any time, Scott, I'm going to kind of turn it over to you, and let's discuss your topic here of virtual matched pair.
Okay. Well, those techniques that you talked about on the there's a textbook, The Appraisal of Real Estate, 13th edition. On page 316, it has a couple of paragraphs about all the techniques that are recognized. And I'll just read one little 2 or 3 sentence paragraph. It says, when sufficient data is available for pure pairings, for example, pairs of sales that are identical except for the single element being measured, paired data analysis is the foundation for quantitative adjustments. When few pure pairings are available, the appraiser should use other analytical procedures or secondary data to test the reasonableness of the adjustment derived from the pure pairings. So I guess the first thing to keep in mind is that one match pair is that's just one sample.
Right.
Do we know if everything else was equal on those? Well, close enough, I guess, is how we've looked at it. I was happy to find something that was reasonably close. So my view is that because MLS has got so much variation, I mean, that data has been entered by 50 different people. If it's 50 different houses, some of them are less consistent with how they enter the data. We don't really, I mean, my MLS, I can't search for quality. I can't search for condition. I can't search for lot size or lot value. There's a lot of things going on there in the data that make me want to maybe think about trying it a different way. So that's kind of how my brain works. Maybe I'm over analytical, but I kind of want to come down to the last cent sometimes, But anyway, that's
when you look at pairing of data, paired sales, if you will.
Right. Mm-hmm.
What number do you think is a good number to make you feel good and sleep good at night? I mean, as you said, two sales is really probably not enough. And
right.
And you might find 2 sales that are identical except for one item. And maybe the buyer liked the wallpaper, for crying out loud.
Right.
Right. Maybe we can't really allocate. I think that you can allocate that. Let's say that you have 2 exact properties, and the only differential is one's got a 2-car garage and one's got a 1-car.
Right.
And the one with the 2-car sells for $5,000 more.
Right.
Now, we don't know for a fact that $5,000 was attributable only to the additional space of car storage. Maybe right. They just like the colors, we don't know, but I think it would be safe to say that secondary garage or secondary stall doesn't contribute more than that amount.
Who knows? I mean, if the house with the 1-car garage was in better condition, maybe the true adjustment is $10,000.
Right.
You know what I mean? So it's kind of a crapshoot. But anyway, so to me, a virtual pair is something that you construct out of the cost manual, because there you've got no sample problem. All you've got is data on what buildings cost. And if you know the percentage of cost that the market is paying, you've kind of got a virtual price involved. Like the market's paying 70% of the cost. This one costs $200. They're paying $140 for that one. This one costs $220. They're paying a little bit more for that one. So that's my thinking, and I've got a little if I can get it up here, there's a little PowerPoint that takes it through it with some numbers.
Yeah, I think that'd be great.
That might, it might.
And Ben, I don't know if we need your help on that or not. He's one of the technical gurus here, Ben or Sam.
Okay. Do you see virtual match pairs? Okay. What this really is, I think, I mean, it seems like if two things are true, they're probably related when it comes to the appraisal business. They relate somehow. And to me, virtual match pairs simulating a paired sale, it ends up being the depreciated cost. It's pretty interesting, but I'll take you through it here. Pure pairs, as we talked about before, those are two houses that differ in only one characteristic. In this case, we're just going to talk about GLA. So we've got two houses out there that have got equal bedroom count, equal bath count, equal site value. That's a big one. Equal quality, equal condition. Again, you can't find that in MLS unless you look through all the photos. The MLS search that you would go through, you can't search for quality. You can't search for site value or condition. So you can see that the water's getting a little bit muddy here, right?
Right.
Okay, so what my approach is, after you've had the subject inspected, you know what the house is. You've identified your comps. Your grid is complete. Everything's sitting there in front of you on your screen. You haven't done any adjustments yet, but the grid is ready to go because all the characteristics are filled in. You choose the best comp, and then you got to go to work. Okay, this is something that people aren't doing, I'm sure. You run the cost approach on that best comp, and the reason you do that is so that you can extract the depreciation from the market. So you've got to have a comp that will show you, how big the garage is, how big the deck is. I mean, it's got to be. It might take some hunting to find that best comp, but it should be an equal condition to the subject, equal site value, pretty much. But that's the one you're looking for. Then you run the cost approach on that comp to extract the depreciation. And let's just say that we have done that now, and that the depreciation is 30%. Okay. So the market is paying 70% of cost new for a house that's perfectly paired with, that comp. All right. So now we're going to go to the cost manual. Let's say that this best comp has 2,200 square feet of GLA. We want to bracket that GLA, right? We want to come at it from above and below. So we start with 2,000 and 2,400. Those are the two GLAs of these paired comps. And again, they're equal in every other way. If we look in our cost book, the 2,400 square foot number in the cost book is 105 per foot. So in other words, that one of the pair has a $252,000 cost for GLA. And we've already agreed that the market is paying 70% of that, right? So they're paying 176 for the GLA of that first house of the two pairs.
Right.
Then it doesn't take long. You go back to the same table and you find 109 per foot for the 2,000 square foot house. Extend that out, it's 218 new. 70% of that is 152.6. So now there's a 400 square foot difference. This is, again, it's the only difference in these two imaginary or virtual comps. The market would pay 23.8 for those if they're paying 70% of cost. And again, we've used the same cost data to do the depreciation. So we're really talking about apples and apples. It's the same data, same benchmark. So if we divide that 23.8 by 400, we end up with a GLA adjustment of 59.50, rounded off to 60. But this market is paying for $60 per foot for GLA by either look at it however you want, pairing data, pairing cost, pairing depreciated cost, or pairing a virtual sale. But that's that's the idea behind our system. Now that to get to that $59.50, I've got some good news for you. You don't have to go through that agony of finding the cost of your most similar comp, that $59.50 can actually be found by regression in the cost manual, and that's what our software does. We use regression with the cost data to find the variable or the marginal cost of GLA, the marginal cost of a garage stall, the marginal cost of a fireplace. Any of the things that we're giving you adjustments for are all based on marginal cost in the cost data. And again, we're using that same cost data to figure out what the depreciation is. So we think it's a valid indicator. It's not proof. We think it's support. It's the kind of support that you do the math first and then you make one assumption instead of making 7 different assumptions and then doing the math.
Great. Scott, I'm going to ask you to actually back up a couple of slides. And just for an old country boy from Kentucky like me, I need to see something a couple of times.
Okay.
So if you don't mind, we've got more viewers coming on each moment, and we do have some questions coming in. So I'm going to kind of fire some questions at you in just a second.
All right.
But if you don't mind, go through this again, and I may actually stop you a couple of times.
Sure.
And go from there. But go right ahead and
okay.
I may ask you some questions.
Okay.
While we go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, what we're going to do is instead of looking in the market at market data for paired sales, we're going to look for paired costs in the cost manual, and then whatever that cost happens to be, we're going to multiply that cost times the percentage of cost that the market is paying. So, we use the same set of data to figure out the percentage of cost being paid by the market for the best comp in the batch. I think of it as simulating paired sales because it works pretty much the same. Again, pure pairs, those are 2 houses that differ in only the one characteristic that you're trying to measure. Okay, everything's equal. They differ only in this case, they only differ in GLA. Now, the beauty of this is you can have that characteristic be anything you want in the cost book without running out of comps. I mean, the cost book is loaded with data to make virtual comps. Okay.
And let me stop you right there, Scott, because we just have one question.
Sure.
You're asking, what is your cost data source? There's obviously several available publications, and what are you using either in your software or what your suggestion is?
Sure. Okay. Well, what we are using is something published by the Craftsman Book Club. They're out of California, and they've been publishing a book called National Building Cost for the last 40, 50 years. And it's a program that you can buy the book for $80. You can buy the ebook for like $60, I think it is. We license the data from them, so we pay them a pretty hefty percentage from every sale we make to use their data. But for many, many years, I used something else from RS Means, and doing the same cost calculations, it was virtually identical. It was within a 1%. I think these guys had a little bit lower on the garage and higher on the basement was the only difference, but the total came out very close. So it's national building cost.
And so this is your data source that you're using and subscribing to for your software. But if somebody wanted to use a different cost service, that would work as well. Right,
exactly. Like I've not used one of these lately, but if you would go into your cost service and do the cost on a 2,000 square foot house, and then do it again on a 2,400 square foot cost, keeping everything else equal, it's going to show you the difference in cost between of that $400 or that 400 square feet.
Right. Okay.
I
didn't mean to interrupt, but I do want to ask some of these as we pull those in. All right. So your screen's got down that we've got a pairing, and the only difference is gross living area.
Right. So this is redundant, but they've got equal bedroom count, equal bath count. And up in Minnesota, that's a problem because they'll say it's a 4-bedroom house, but it's 3 above and 1 below, 2 above and 2 below. I mean, the 3 bathrooms could be spread out. 1 could be in the basement. So it might be easier if you're in an area where there are no basements to actually equalize bedroom and bath count. They've got to have an equal site value if there can only be one difference. They have to be equal in quality, equal in condition. And when you go to do your search in MLS, at least in my MLS, I can't search for quality. I can't search for site value. I can get site size, but not site value. I cannot search for condition. I mean, you can read through them and say one of them is a fixer-upper and one of them is completely remodeled, but there's not a quick way to search for condition. So that's what drove me to the idea of making it, composing these properties in the virtual world. All right. So that's why I call them a virtual match pair. And to use this, first of all, you have to go see the subject. You have to know what you're dealing with. You have to find a pool of comparables that you can put in the grid.
Now, when you say comparables that we
right.
put in the grid, these are actually properties that would compete with the subject, number one,
right.
for the same buyers. And these are actually properties that have sold?
Yes. Oh, yeah.
Okay.
This, like when I go out on an appraisal, I bring maybe 10 or 12 possibilities with me and take photos of 8 or 10 of them after I see the house. And then when I get back to my desk, I put them in the grid and kind of sort them and figure out which one's my best one.
Okay. So these are actually comparable sales.
Right. These are sales.
You're gridding out. Okay.
Okay. And now you've got you've chosen the best comp. There's one that stands out to you as being the most credible one to start with. Okay. And now, once you've got that comparable, you know what it sold for. If you can estimate what the land was worth, now you know the depreciated cost of that house. And if you can figure out what that cost would, or what that house would cost to build with today's rates, which you do in the cost approach, you will know the depreciation.
So let me pause you there for our viewers. If I'm understanding this right, what you're talking about doing is taking a comparable sale. Let's just call it comparable sale 1. How's that? Okay.
Perfect.
So you're taking comparable sale number 1 and you're doing something that most folks don't do. You're actually doing a cost approach on comparable sale number 1.
Right.
Okay. All right. I'm with you. Go ahead.
All right. So after we've completed that, okay, we're going to extract depreciation with that comp. Let's say
because depreciation is defined as the difference between cost and value on the same day. So you run the cost approach, you've got the sale, you've got the indicated value. Go ahead. Right.
So now let's, for the sake of argument, let's say that the depreciation is 30%.
Okay.
What that means is that the market is paying 70% of the cost new for houses identical to that property, right? Okay. Right. So remember that number, 70%, because that's going to come in handy later when we do our virtual sale. Okay.
Right. So everything you've got right now is actually the sale occurred. That's a fact.
That's a fact. And
comparable sale number 1 sold for whatever amount.
Right. What we found out is that the best comp that we can find with our judgment sold for 70% of cost new plus the land.
Right.
Okay.
Gotcha.
All right. So with that information in mind, remember that 70% number.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to look for the GLA adjustment. This sale had 200 or 2,200 square feet, let's just say for an example. So we want to bracket that and come at that value from both directions, correct? All right. So we look in the cost manual for a 2,400 square foot comp, 2,400 square foot quantity. And we look in the table and we see that it's 105 per square foot.
Okay.
So when it was, the replacement cost on that GLA is $252,000. Okay.
So if that property were to sell in this market,
right,
sell for 176.4
plus the land, plus the garage, plus the decks and the porches and so on. Right.
Sure. Improvements 176.4.
Yep, the GLA is 176.4.
Okay.
There could be a swimming pool. Who knows?
And this is where we're getting into the virtual, because there's not a sale of a 2,400 square foot house.
Right.
We're just doing the research. What would a house in this market cost to construct of 2,200 square feet? It'd be 252. Now you're applying your 70% to bring it again to this particular market. I'm with you. I'm with you.
The light bulb kind of went off for me when I realized that by definition, we're trying to find a pure pairing. So by definition, it has to have the same amount of depreciation.
Right.
Same condition. Okay. So 176.4 is what it cost, what the market would pay for that 2,400 square foot house. Then we look for a 2,000 foot house in the cost manual, again, the perfect sample. And we find that it's 109 per foot. So we extend that out, it's $218,000. 70% of that, again, it's got the exact same amount of depreciation, same quality. That one would sell for 152.6 in the current market. So that's a virtual sale of 2,000 square feet of GLA, if you will. Okay. Then we just do the math. A change of 400 feet resulted in $23,800 of market value. The market reaction to 400 feet is 23.8. 23.8 divided by 400 is $59.50. So again, we're just doing arithmetic.
Sure.
With the best data that we can find, using our judgment to identify the best comp, using our judgment to figure out what the land was worth on that comp. But that's the basic behind the virtual match pair. Now the good news is that that $59.50,
right?
We can get to that number a lot quicker than by going through the cost approach on comp one. And what we found is that we went into that cost manual, and it had, let's say it had quantities all the way from 800 square feet up to 3,600 square feet.
Okay.
What I did is I multiplied the cost per foot by each one of those. So I got a long table of total cost of GLA for all those different quantities. And I did regression, and I was expecting the typical shotgun pattern, you know,
right?
Whenever you do regression, they have to do a best fit line. What happened was the line came off almost perfectly straight.
Really?
So what happened, I realized, is that I had just cracked the cost manual. What I found out was that a Q4, according to these guys anyway, and they're a source that you can refer to, it's an unbiased source. What they're saying is that a Q4 is worth $44,000 fixed cost. That's the cost to build anything, plus $80 a foot. And that's that $80 is the marginal cost. And if you look at regression, the y equals ax plus b is the $40,000. Now, at each quality rating, we've got 11 quality ratings in our software. There'll be a different fixed cost and a different marginal cost. And that's why we've got different adjustments for every quality rating and every percentage of depreciation.
Great. Scott, on this slide that you have up here now, where you've concluded $59.50, and I know you're rounding that to $60.
Right.
Have you went through this and actually tested this? You know, what I do when I measure a house and I calculate by hand, you know, the house is only one size. You're going to get the same answer no matter how you chop it up and calculate it out. I'm just curious if you've went through this and you've gotten the $59.50 as you have on the screen here.
Right.
Have you tested that by maybe running a regression sample? I know you need a good size sampling, a regression sample, or maybe the traditional pairing method, or you know, have group sales. Have you done something else that has kind of given you a litmus test, if you will, with your $59.50 here? In this example.
All right. Well, there's some assumptions here that we need to talk about. What we're making this huge assumption right now that 30% depreciation occurred equally throughout the house.
Right.
In other words,
the GLA only.
Right. But that 30% was for all of the different parts of that house. So after using this for quite a while, I'm realizing that people pay pretty much. A garage has a lifespan of 60 years. A basement, a foundation has a lifespan of 60 years. In theory, the house has a lifespan of 60 years, but the things that the market reacts to are things like new carpet, new paint. Those have 10-year lives. Maybe a furnace at 20 years, a roof at 25, siding at 40, windows at 40. So what'll happen is
and this can vary, folks, because I know a Shoney's building that lasted 5 years.
Right.
Okay. Okay.
Right. So as I was using this, what I discovered was that GLA adjustment was more often was too high than it was too low. Like it would turn my grid inside out.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean by that? Like the inexpensive house becomes high and the low house goes low, or the high house goes low and the low house goes high. So you know you're doing something wrong. But we've got a couple hundred users out there, and we did a survey. I think we got 68 responses, and we asked them a question using that calculation, that whatever that happens to be, in your grids, and then using sensitivity analysis.
Right.
What do you think we should use for the percentage of effective age of that house after all those different things are going on? Like you might have an appraisal where everything's brand new. That will probably have a high GLA adjustment. As houses get old and get the condition starts to fall away, all those short-lived items are pretty much consumed, and you'll probably have a very small GLA adjustment. You know, as the houses get older and the condition gets lower, I tend to find just anecdotally that the adjustment for sheer space goes down, and condition and location become a bigger factor as the houses age. So what we did is we did a survey. We found out that I think 80 some people wrote back. We had we like to calibrate that number by a factor of 64%. So what I'll do is I'll start off with that $60, and then I'll also have 36 in the back of my mind, and I'll go and do the grid and see which one has the narrower range of adjusted sold values. So again, it's a guideline. We're kind of comparing, or now we're adding market survey into it. Like
Sure.
If you do this arithmetic, blindly assuming that depreciation is equal in every category of the house, what are you really seeing when you do it in experience? So we're taking that intelligence, that group thinking, and saying that that number might be a little bit high, but it's a good place to start.
Yeah. So, and let me ask you again, in this example, you use comparable sale number one. It was the best sell. And then you did a cost approach on it to get the percentage attributable to the improvement only.
Right.
And then you did the math simply. What would it cost to build a house at 2,400 square feet? I believe our subject in this example was 2,200 square feet.
Correct.
You bracketed it. You went cost of a 2,400 square foot. You applied the 70% to get the contributory value of the improvement only at 176. Then you did the same thing with a smaller property. You isolated the difference of 400 feet. You divided it by the difference, giving you a price per foot. Now this was actually done with two virtual pairs, if you will, but then with one actual sale, comparable sale number one.
Right.
And so we've got a data set here comparing two virtual sales, one actual sale. How many of these would you do to kind of get a comfort level? I assume you're doing more than one. Your software probably does it pretty quickly, but if someone wanted to try and do this by hand, if you will, what would be your recommendation to look at as far as a data set, something you feel good about, you can put in a master file? And folks need to realize that you don't have to do this on every single assignment and put in every work file. You can do an analysis of a particular neighborhood or particular subdivision or particular market area, if you will, and use that for support for the next period of time, whatever you feel, until there's a market change, if you will. Keep that in a master file and then use indicates that you've got to have a reference in your file. So you could say, hey, the data is in master file A and file cabinet Z if you want to. But how many of these sales would you recommend doing this before you feel good and actually go with that's in this case $60 a foot?
Right. Right. One way to approach that would be to take your best 3 sales and add up the total GLA, so that you've got $500,000 worth of GLA, for instance. You don't have to do each one individually. You can just total them all up across the grid. But personally, what I do is I just, once I figured out that I can use regression in the cost manual to figure out what the variable cost is, and I can use the cost approach to figure out what the depreciation is. I don't mess around with it. I just go right to my the data that I've got out of the cost manual. I did regression again in the cost manual to show what the cost per foot is on every different quality level. And then as far as the depreciation percentage, if I'm doing a desktop, I will estimate it. I will just say, okay, the effective age on this one is 30 years. The economic life is 60, so I'm going to use 50%. And that's a judgment call that we're allowed to make. On page 1 of the 1004, it asks you for your estimate of effective age. And whenever you're estimating effective age, you are estimating depreciation. So to me, it's just taking one assignment result and using it in another part of the appraisal.
Yeah, so the effective age, as a reminder, and we've got some new folks. I taught an appraisal principle class the other day, and we may have some viewers on there. So I want to break that down. When we talk about effective age, we're talking about what does the property look like, if you will, as opposed to the chronological age.
Right.
People ask how old I am. I typically give my effective age. I used to give my effective age. But all right, Scott, we've got some questions. I don't know if that's the end of your PowerPoint right there.
Sure.
Right? But you can pull that slide off if you like, so that it's not stale and we get to see you again. So one question we've got by Matt is, how is depreciated cost applied in a new construction or to new construction?
That's a really good question, because after I started using this, I would go out and apply my techniques to a new construction property. And what I found out was that the builders don't look in the cost manual when they price a house.
Yeah, they forgot to do that.
Right. And thinking about it, the construction cost it's not something that they make up. It's a result of a huge survey that they update every year with, inflation rates and so on. But at some point there was a survey of builders, and there's not a single house that costs that much. A group of 100 houses has an average cost of that amount. You know what I mean?
Sure.
So it's almost impossible to pretend that you could do the cost approach on a new house and end up with a match between what the builder sold it for and what your cost book said it should be. So what we did is we came up with a program using the same data. We call it Solomon Cost New. And you go through the same process of entering the square footage, the site value, and so on, and it'll show you the percentage of cost book that the builder is working at. Maybe it's 95%, maybe it's 105%. But then we go to the GLA number and we equalize that so that we end up with the cost equaling what the builder sold it for, and with knowing what that equalizing amount is for GLA, then we make an adjustment on replacement cost, not depreciated cost, because there's no depreciation, but it's just strictly replacement cost. So
if I understood that correctly, you're telling me in all, or at least most of the instances, you're finding that the cost of construction is actually a little lower than what some of the cost publications are.
It could be lower or higher. I would think the builder is always a little bit. It's usually higher than the book in my market. I'm not sure about others, but mean, back when I was being trained, the idea was that you've always got to have the cost approach higher than the sale price, right?
Yeah, and I've always challenged that, because my position is, if the cost approach always sets the upper limit of value, why? I mean, if anyone's ever built a house, didn't you think that the house was worth at least what you just paid for it the day you moved in?
Right.
If not, why would anybody build a new house if it wasn't worth at least what you just paid for it? I mean, hopefully your house is worth more than what you just paid for it the minute you moved in. Hey, Scott, we've got some other questions coming in, and let's try to get to as many as we can. Randy is asking a question. So when I use this method, would it be correct to label it as a virtual pairs method?
I would stay away from anything that they could not find in a book. You know, after dealing with FHA people on questions about lead paint and different things, all they want to do is look in the reference book. They don't want to think outside the box. So I would call it paired data, or I would call it depreciated cost, because those are numbers, or those are words that are used on page 316 and 317 of the book. You know, you can always point to them.
And it really is what you're doing is you're kind of doing a blend of those, if you will. You are
right.
You are pairing data,
right?
And you are using depreciated costs,
right? It's really, I mean, virtual match pairs is kind of a way to explain paired. It's a way to explain depreciated cost. You know, it's not a separate method. It's just a different way of thinking about it.
Okay, a couple of other questions. I think this one we've kind of just answered. We had a question. If they use this method, do they have to credit you as the creator of the method? So I think Scott just kind of answered that he recommends you don't necessarily use the term virtual paired method. No. Just use paired or depreciated cost, something like that you can find as a recognized technique in appraisal literature.
It's paired data right on page 317 of the textbook. You know, it's not sale data, it's cost data. So,
Scott, we have another question from Pascal. Pascal is asking, can you give an example with bedrooms?
Okay. Interestingly, bedrooms do not affect the cost in the data that we license. So we can't come to you and say a bedroom costs $2,000. I mean, I tried to do that. I tried to figure out, okay, what's it cost to build a closet? What's it cost to have a light fixture in a bedroom and a door? And I just pretty much gave up on it because bedrooms don't impact cost in the data that we're licensing. Simple as that. We just don't want to try to make something up. What we did do is we did surveys. Again, we've got a user base out there that likes to interact with each other, and we've done some surveys. And what we did is we asked about a median priced house. What would a fourth bedroom be worth? What would a third bedroom be worth? And we took all those responses and averaged them and applied them, you know, as a percentage. It turns out it was like 3.1% of the cost of a median priced house was a good adjustment for the third bedroom, and then like 1.5% for the fourth bedroom. And I think we had that same kind of a survey with you last time. But on our website, there's a page called Free Calculators, and you can type in the value of a house, and it'll show you the survey results for a bunch of different categories. One of them happens to be bedrooms.
Right. We just got a comment from Tim, and at first I thought he's yelling at me, but now because I agree with this comment, so maybe he was agreeing with me. He said, if the cost to construct a house is greater than its market value, then it is not financially feasible to build that house, thus not the highest and best use of the land is vacant. I agree wholeheartedly with that. That's why I was saying, why would anybody ever build a house if it wasn't worth at least what they just paid for it the day they moved in? I mean, it just wouldn't make a whole lot of sense. Scott, what other areas are you finding that this technique works real well? I know you said the bedrooms typically is included in the entire cost, but can we actually, you had a nice example there of GLA Could I use this for garage? For what typically works best with this?
Well, in the data that we license, we've got basement size, which was kind of an eye opener to me. It solved a lot of mysteries. You know, why does the 2-story sell for less per foot than the 1-story? And it turns out that's because the 1-story has such a big basement.
Interesting.
And then basement finish, we've got a number for that. We've got numbers for fireplace, the garage. Turns out that the first stall of a garage costs 67% more than the second or third stall. So the adjustment from 0 to 1 is much larger than from 1 to 2 or 2 to 3.
Sure. Very good. Okay, so I'm going to give you an opportunity to, number one, let our viewers know how they can get in touch with you. I did have another question, and Scott, this is totally up to you. This is a recorded webinar, by the way, so if those viewing want to see it again, or if you have friends or family that want to see it, you can certainly let them know it's being recorded and be available on our website and some social media sites a little later on. But we did have a question. The gentleman asked, could he get a copy of your PowerPoint presentation?
If you want to send me your email, I'd be happy to send it along to you. I think it'll be on your recording here, so they can watch it that way, but I'd be happy to send it to anybody who wants it.
Great. Go ahead and give your email address again, Scott, and your contact information.
SCULLEN2@comcast.net.
Great. And Scott, I believe you're going to be, you've got an article coming out, I believe. Tell us real quick about the article and where we can read that.
Okay. Working RE magazine is going to be publishing an article I wrote in the September issue. It'll also be on their email newsletter. But what we're talking about there is pretty much the importance of sample size before you do anything with an appraisal. And I use an example similar to this, the one that we just went through, and I think we call it paired data in there. But that'll be coming out the end of September.
Okay, great. And then if I remember correctly, and we've got some questions coming back in, so I'll try to get to those before we end the broadcast. Hang tight. Now it's going crazy. Everybody's asking questions.
It's the Holy Grail.
They always wait till we're about done, right? So again, if we can't get to all the questions, folks, and I apologize if we don't, we will send these to Scott and ask that he try to communicate these answers to you in a timely fashion. Scott, the rumor has it that you're going to be teaching or offering some sort of little, either a lecture or seminar. Tell us where that's going to occur, because we've got viewers from all around the country on our webinar here at the Appraisal Report. Tell folks where they can find you and participate in maybe a lecture or a live class.
Well, there's an appraiser in South Carolina who jumped on board about a year ago, and at the time he was the president of the South Carolina Association, and he wants me to come and speak at their meeting coming up in September in Columbia. It's not firm yet. I asked them about travel expenses, and he's no longer the chairman of that committee. So, and there's another speaker that they've already got. So I'm not sure what's going to happen there, but you know, I'm open to meetings that have appraisers gathered together to you know, come out and talk about it.
Great. So if any of our viewers are involved with any state organizations, you might reach out. Maybe he could come speak to one of your chapter meetings, if you will. A couple of more questions, Scott, and then we're going to have to cut everybody off, and I hate to do that. This is just one. Do you offer or have a CE class for depreciated cost method?
Well, Brian, I'd love to confer with you on that.
Okay. All right.
I don't have a class, but I think there's plenty of content here to go 4 hours.
Great.
Because if you look at my website, it starts off with effective age and goes all the way down to you know, depreciated cost. And there's a lot of good content that I kind of discovered just reading the literature, and I'd be happy to put that out there for you. Now, I did just finish a series of 4 videos that go through our application, the application that we sell, or that people
where can they
subscribe to.
find those videos at, Scott?
It's at www.solomonappraisal.com, and there's a link called Training Videos, and there's just a 4-part series that takes you through depreciated cost, and then our first program, which took the appraiser's estimate of effective age to calculate depreciation, and then our second application goes through the whole cost approach to extract the depreciation from the market. And then the third one is like our earlier question, how do you do new construction? We made a calculator that equalizes the builder cost with the cost book to give you replacement cost adjustments for new construction. And then the last one that turns out to be pretty important is doing market extraction of the site value. Because if you have the site value wrong, everything else will be wrong doing the depreciated cost.
Well, that's interesting you bring that up, because and there are 6 recognized techniques for developing or supporting your opinion of land value. I always tell folks pick 1 or 2. But a question just came in, and the question is asking of you, Scott, which do you prefer, extraction or allocation for the site value?
Well, it kind of depends on the neighborhood. The first thing I do on every appraisal is look at the subject neighborhood or zip code or city, whatever it happens to be, and look for a sale of a lot within the last 2 years.
Right.
And I might find 1 or 2, and then I might make some adjustments without really going through the whole comparison process. But if that one happens to be larger, I might adjust it down a little bit. Just again, based on my experience, which I know is not valid. But I'll always have, I'll either say there are no sales or that there was this sale, and then I'll put it in the report. And then my next approach is to take the data off of page 1, where you're giving the median for the neighborhood. Let's say that the median price is $240,000. And then I look in the tax records, and I find a ratio between the site value and the sale price according to the assessor. Let's say that the assessor's ratio is 25%. Then I'll just cite that the assessor ratio, LTV, is 25%. The median price is $240,000, so this indicates a value of $60,000. And then just to top it off, I might say something like, well, the assessor's site value is $50,000. Most weight is given to the sale because the assessor's value tends to lag a market. Something like that. But
yeah, and with that, and I would recommend if folks are going to use assessor information, number 1, you need to disclose that. Number 2, you got to be careful, because that's somebody else's opinion,
right?
And number 3, it could be 4 years old. I mean, the assessors, tax assessors, and boy, they have a tough job, don't they? Can you imagine trying to develop an opinion of value of every parcel in your entire county? So that's a big job. They have a different model. They have a mass appraisal model. It's a little different than what you and I do, but most importantly, that data could be 4 years old. But I can appreciate the fact that you have challenges when you're in a built-up area, as opposed to doing a rural or urban property, if you will,
right,
where there's a plentiful data of land sales.
Mm-hmm. Well, using our application Solomon site, you can take a comparable that has the similar lot, and the house should be in similar condition, similar lot, and you could run through that application in about a minute and get an extraction of what that site value would be. Again, you're having to estimate the effective age of that house. Sure. because you can extract depreciation if you know the land, and you can extract land if you know the depreciation. But if you don't know either one, you're kind of stuck.
Okay, and we're going to wrap things up, and clearly you gave us a lot to think about today, Scott, and you showed mathematically how you can extract some of these things using pairing of data and depreciated costs. You call it virtual match paired, but it really is a pairing of data and depreciated costs. I believe that's what you told one of the questioners a moment ago. somebody can do that on their own. I mean, they can
Right.
do that. They can run an Excel spreadsheet. They can subscribe to a cost manual. But it sounds like you may have something that some folks might want to explore with your software. So go ahead and let folks know. I know you said you had some videos. Let folks know how they can find out more about you, more about your software. What's your website?
www.solomonappraisal.com. And what we offer is all 4 applications for $10 a month. And if it's a recurring subscription, so it won't stop until you tell us to stop it. And we've had some people that bought it 2 or 3 months in a row, and and we thanked them, but tried to give them back their money when they complained, you know.
Gotcha.
But then we've also got an annual that's $100, so you can save 20% to do it annually. And I think it's everything that appraisers would need if they do residential appraisal. They don't need any other cost data. It's all part of the package. So I think it's a bargain, because I think Marshall and Swift is hundreds of dollars, and I think we're pretty competitive with anybody out there as far as just pure cost data.
Scott, we've got 1 minute left, and I hate to put you on the spot, but we've gotten this a couple of questions. Are you offering any kind of discount? Maybe a little trial or something for those watching the webinar? And I hate to put you on the spot.
No,
like that.
not at all. I'm happy to do it. We have a 14-day free trial, so people can try it, and if they don't like it, nothing ventured, nothing lost. So you'll find that if you click order on the website. And then there's also with that new article coming out with Working RE, we're offering I think it might be 10% off on the annual subscription. So I think it's a $10 discount. But anyway, when you get to the checkout, if you use the code CRED, you'll get a discount of $10 or something.
So that's CRED.
Correct.
Okay, great. Well, again, I'd like to thank my guest this month, Mr. Scott Cullen. He gives us something to think about, and that's what we as appraisers need to do. We're analysts. We do a lot of analyzing, if you will, and he's giving you another way to look at things, and I'm thankful. Thanks, Scott, for being here, and look forward to seeing you again real soon.
I enjoyed it. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, guys. Again, the webinar has been recorded. We've got another exciting guest coming up next month. Stay tuned. If you would like to be on the appraisal report or know of someone you think that would be a wonderful guest, please contact me, Brian at appraisereLearning.com. We would like to thank everyone for their attendance, for their questions. If we didn't get to your question, we will forward those on to Mr. Cullen, and hopefully he will be responding to you very, very soon. Until we see you again, happy appraising. Have a great week. Thanks, folks.
Thank you.